والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear guest over here, physically together with us, and the ones who present or who will be present on Zoom link or YouTube channel of ISTEC. Today we have a continuity of previous introduction of Malay journalism and intellectualism. Prof. American Hojam will present the idea of Hamka. The full title of the presentation is Early Ideas on Journalism and Reform in the Malay Archipelago. Notes from Hamka's Ayahku. Ayahku, the work of Hamka. Hamka, or in another saying, Haji Abdul Malik bin Karim Amrullah. Briefly, he is known as Hamka. So he is one of the distinguished scholars, literary persons, religious activists in the contemporary Indonesia. He experienced many different stages of changes happened since the beginning of 20th century till he passed away in 1981. Colonial era, independence struggle in the archipelago, post-independence era, decolonization, and all these processes starting from 30s. He became significantly engaged in diverse movements in the archipelago. He became a self-taught person. As we observed, there are some other members or examples in this context in the archipelago. American Hojam will enlighten us about modernity and colonization, or colonization and modernity in the context of Hamka. Prof. American Hojam, please welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Mehmet. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This talk today is titled Early Ideas on Journalism and Reform in the Malay World, Notes from Hamka's Ayahku. This is a second series of talk on the series Journalism, Reform and Society that we are convening in ISTEC. The idea here is to get the conversation on journalism going. We will be talking about various aspects of journalism as a profession, as an institution, as a culture, as part of modern civilization. And we thought that it's important that this conversation and this discussion on journalism be shared among the public and students of social science and journalism, and to look at journalism from a non-state-centric perspective. In other words, we are looking at journalism from across the nations in the Malay Archipelago, principally happenings historically and sociologically in the peninsula and in Sumatra. We thought that in the period before World War II, since the beginning of the early press in the Malay Archipelago in the 1850s, much has happened in a shared manner. Journalists and editors from Sumatra, from Minangkabau, instrumental in pioneering newspapers and periodicals in Malaya, especially based in Singapore and Pulau Pinang. So here we're trying to look into to understand and to illustrate the embeddedness of periodical and journalism in the Malay Archipelago. We have to see journalism not as an adjunct of society, not in terms of the rule, but as part of modern civilization, as part of creating consciousness, and as part of instigating ideas on modernity. And here I would confine to Hamka's observation in his book Ayahku. Just now, Dr. Mehmet has given some introduction to Hamka. But essentially, Hamka, also to add, is he died in 1981, is popular across the Straits of Malacca. Hamka was an educator, a scholar, an ulama, a novelist, a writer, and a journalist. Hamka was involved in the struggle for independence. He was involved in the debates in Malaysia and Sumatra on the issues of modernity and how Islam is confronted, the interactions between Muslims and the modern world. I have found a passage, or two paragraphs actually, which are quite relevant for today's talk. This is from the book Peter Riddle, Islam and the Malay Indonesian World. And he talks about Hamka, which is very pertinent here. He says that Haji Abdul Malik Karim Amrullah has been referred to as the Hamzah Fansuri of the modern age. We're talking about postmodernism with my colleague just now, and this equate Hamka with Hamzah Fansuri is quite interesting. Hamka, as it came to be known, was born in the Minangkabau region of West Sumatra and was the son of Haji Rasul, one of the key figures in introducing modernist ideas to the Minangkabau region. Not only to the Minangkabau region, but also to the Malay Peninsula, to the Malays in Malaysia. Haji Rasul's contribution to modernist thinking in Sumatra is well encapsulated in Hamka's book Ayahku, meaning my father, which I have here. I have the later edition, which appeared or first published in the 1950s. Hamka's formal education extended only as far as primary school level. He had not been educated higher than that. However, he was able to benefit from his father's expertise in the area of Islamic studies to study a broad range of Islamic subjects with his father as a child, including the text of the Quran. Between the ages of 8 and 15, Hamka attended several religious schools, and this pattern in his religious education, supplemented by the family environment in which he grew up, destined him to follow in his father's footsteps as a scholar of Islam. The very nature of his Islamic education was also a significant factor in his later eclectic approach to Islamic practice and thought. So Hamka has made some pertinent observations on journalism and reform, which I think need to be shared to those interested or involved in the study of Islam, journalism, periodicals, and culture in the Malay Archipelago. Many of the discourses on reform on journalism was written by, for example, W.R. Roth. William Roth has written many works, one of which is his periodicals, a list of periodicals, and his book on the origins of Malay nationalism, where he touched on the reform press. He elaborated on Al-Imam, and he mentioned the origins of Al-Imam. And instantly, we are going to center on Al-Imam. Al-Imam, 1906 and 1908, published in Singapore, is perhaps one of the most overstudied Bahasa Melayu periodicals in the world. Early Bahasa Melayu periodicals started in, when I say periodicals here, I mean also newspapers, began in 1852 in Indonesia, but this was a commercial newspaper in the Semarang, Surat Khabar Bahasa Melayu. But the first or the earliest Malay Bahasa Melayu newspaper in Malaysia is Jawi Peranakan, 1876. And from Jawi Peranakan to World War II, we have about more than 300 Bahasa Melayu periodicals and newspapers. Why I say Bahasa Melayu periodicals and newspapers? Because essentially from 1876 to 1939, all these newspapers and periodicals are funded and managed by two communities. One are the Hadrami communities, and the other by the Jawi Peranakan community. In other words, they were led, they were funded, they were managed, and the Malays would complain, saying that there are no Malay periodicals editorialized and managed by the Malays. So Utusan Melayu came into the picture in 1939. Utusan Melayu was the first newspaper as such. So when you talk about Al-Imam has been categorized as a Bahasa Melayu, but Hadrami newspaper. Of course, these things are contested by historians and by sociologists. But here we're talking about the origins of Al-Imam as a periodical and as a newspaper. Some has regarded Al-Imam as the first radical newspaper. Roth has regarded Al-Imam, and also as the first political newspaper in the Malay world. But Al-Imam has its antecedents, and this is where I want to share with you on what Hamka says about Al-Imam and its antecedents, and also the successor of Al-Imam, which is Al-Munir. I think Taifun, my student, are familiar, and also Dr. Mehmet will be familiar with Al-Munir, published in Padang. Now, in this talk, I have translated and rephrased the chapter 6 of Hamka's Ayahku for the benefit of those who do not read Bahasa Melayu. Hamka's Ayahku first published in January 1st of 1950, in which Hamka wrote about his father, Sheikh Abdul Karim Amrullah, an ulama and scholar in his own right. Hamka wrote that writing about his father is similar to writing to the development of Islam in the Minangkabau region, difficult, complex, and contradictory, reflecting a society firmly rooted in the encounter between pembangunan agamanya, in Hamka's words, dan kekerasan adatnya. Pembangunan agamanya dan kekerasan adatnya. In English, perhaps advancement of religion and the orthodoxy of its customs. Why would it be centered? Why would it be pertinent? Because in the Minangkabau region, the custom is matrilineal. So there is this contestation between what is correct and what is incorrect, and this created a debate until now among the Minangkabaus and among those in Negeri Sembilan practicing the matrilineal culture of the emphasis on what is called adat. When you read discourses on the Minangkabau, the word adat is always there. I think it's perhaps overemphasized. There are many other things about the Minangkabau society, one of which is Berantau. But the word adat is central, and the institution of adat is central. It's as if adat cannot be changed or cannot be modified by religion. But there are, of course, many other things that has been rationalized, especially the saying adat basadi syarak basadi kitab Allah is a saying apparently coming from Imam Bonjol, who was the leader of the Perang Padri. Now, in chapter 6, titled Semangat Pembaharuan Islam dan Mengalirnya ke Indonesia, the spirit of Islamic renewal and its penetration into Indonesia, Hamka discusses on the role of the press and journalism. It's very important how this chapter illustrates that the press and journalism is not just an appendage of society. The press is part and integral of the dynamism and the context society, just like institution of law, just like the institution of politics, institution of religion, for that matter. So the early development of the press should be seen as an important indicator of the embeddedness of journalists and newspapers. At that time, it was the print media. At that time, it was the emergence and the celebration of print culture. Of course, now we may not see it because now we are so obsessed with the digital social media, and perhaps many of us do not read newspapers anymore. Many of us would say that newspapers are a thing of the past. And newspapers are also poorly circulated because people don't buy newspapers. But the point here is that this to show that print media and print media now has been transformed or migrated into digital media, has a role to play in terms of instituting consciousness in society. So Hamka discusses the role of the press and journalism. The chapter provides useful insights into the dynamics and origins of the periodical Al-Imam, 1906-1908. Later, I'll move to Al-Imam because Al-Imam is central in terms of the transmission and the circulation of the consciousness of Islam in the Malay Archipelago. The figure most associated with Al-Imam is Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi. And Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi has been mentioned in many discourses on Al-Imam. But Hamka has a different view. Hamka did not mention the name Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi. If we were to read the cry of Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi that one of you in my class have presented, we can see that Hamka is central to the development of Al-Imam. One of the things is because Hamka is a good writer. Al-Hadi is a good writer. Al-Hadi is brave and bold. But many of the writings in Al-Imam were not written by Al-Hadi. They were written by a few others. So, notwithstanding that Al-Imam has been the most studied Malay periodical before World War II, what we knew is engaging in Hamka's perspective on journalism relating to reform and renewal in the Malay Minangkabau world. All this idea of reform began with the magazine Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, meaning literally in Malay, tali yang kukuh, or the cord that is strong, tali yang kukuh, or the cord that is strong. Published in Paris in 1884. So the origins of the Reform Press would be, in a sense, it is European based. I may be biased, but it is based on the history of Europe. According to Hamka, the magazine was the outcome of the engagement between Sheikh Muhammad Abduh, who was exiled in Beirut for 3 years, with Said Jamaluddin Al-Afghani. Both traveled to Paris due to unfavorable intellectual and political conditions in the Middle East. The publication of the magazine was to create, according to Hamka, kesedaran. The publication of Al-Urwatul Wuthqa was to create kesedaran, awareness among Muslims of their harga diri, self-worth, and to remind them of the dangers threatening Islam if Muslims continue to be forgetful. So this is reflected in the first issue of Al-Imam. So the name Muhammad Abduh, Jamaluddin Afghani, and another one, Rashid Ridha, are instrumental. These three are the figures in the Islamic modernism movement or the pan-Islamism movement, late 1800, early 1900s. Al-Waratul Wuthqa lasted through 18 issues. In less than a year, it ceased production. Hamka explains that this was not because of the lack of support. The magazine was much welcome and well received throughout the Muslim world. It is anti-colonial. The magazine was banned from being circulated in English colonies. Its writings and commentaries were much awaited, such as those on calls for kebangkitan Islam, resurgence of Islam. So the idea of resurgence of Islam in the modern period would perhaps be based on the pan-Islamic movement. Mementras Jumud, elevation of stagnation, the stagnation of thought. It seems that we were talking yesterday on the Malik bin Nabi. One of the reasons why Malik bin Nabi emerged was because his criticism that there's no ijtihad anymore. The same reason was given by the three Islamic reformers. I'm using it in loose terms, Islamic reformers or Islamic modernists. Kejemudan, the stagnation of thought, and merangsang untuk berfikir, incentive for thinking. In other words, throughout the Muslim world, there was this sense that the Muslims don't think anymore, and the Muslims are losing out in the modern world. So Hamka sees the combination between the power of Muhammad Abduh's words and the depth of Jamaluddin Afghani's philosophy. So the magazine brought about the spirit of reform and renewal in the Middle East, and because this was in Paris, and Muhammad Abduh was exiled in Paris. And Hamka thought that this spirit of reform and renewal was accepted by every soul who yearns for independence. Okay. Because at that time, Muslim world was dominated by the Western powers. There was almost every part of Muslim world was colonized. In fact, every part of the Muslim world was colonized. The periodical was to be feared by Musuh Islam. This is the thinking. The Wuthqa was to be feared by the enemies of Islam. It was widely circulated in India, Iran, and the Malay Archipelago. It was also read in Mecca and Medina. Hamka says that whenever he reread the magazine that saw its demise some 8 decades back, he was reminded of the spirit regurgitated in his message. So this idea of semangat, this idea of spirit, this idea of menentang musuh Islam was there. And the magazine also attracted another figure, which is Rashid Ridha. Rashid Ridha is a propagandist. He knew the power of newspapers and periodicals. In fact, he was the one instrumental in influencing Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi to use journalism as a weapon, okay? To use periodicals as a weapon for a certain advocacy. So Rashid Ridha formed Al-Manar after the end of Urwatul Wuthqa. Al-Manar was published in Cairo in 1898. Yeah? Published in Cairo in 1898. Al-Manar was a continuation of Wuthqa in Islamic reform and renewal. It carried Abduh's Quranic interpretation. Of course, if you go deeper to Abduh, Rashid Ridha, and Jabal Afghani, they have been accused of many things. You may agree with them, you may not agree with them, but their trajectory is slightly different from Malik bin Nabi. They use advancement and modernity within within the Islamic framework. Whereas Malik bin Nabi tried to restructure the thinking of society in a much more deeper and theoretical way. Al-Manar was circulated throughout the Muslim world. And Al-Manar was seen, it was published in Al-Azhar, Cairo, was seen as the reservoir or the platform of the kaum muda, or the young Turks, or the young faction. And this Al-Manar ideology, as it was termed in the Minangkabau world, was in opposition to the conservative ulama, the kaum tua. Okay? Al-Manar was strongly critical of the stagnation and regression facing the Ummah. Al-Manar was also seen as the voice of Muhammad Abdul. Now, seeing the threat posed by Al-Manar, the Egyptian ruler Hadawi threw his support behind the conservative ulama and used them to spread slander and hatred against Abdul and Rida. Both were ridiculed and slandered by the conservative ulama and the establishment in Egypt. Despite challenges and obstacles and incidents of burning the paper, so burning this paper is not new. Okay? They also burned Al-Manar in Egypt. And we have also, I think in the subcontinent also we have burning of newspapers. And in Malaysia also, I think there was this 1980s, Prof, you remember the threat of a pass to burn Utusan Melayu and Utusan Malaysia as a newspaper that is heretical and a newspaper that is profane. And burning of books also is not new. Oxford, the celebrated university, also burned books. They burned Catholic books. When Martin Luther destroyed the Catholic Church, Martin Luther used the printing press. Martin Luther used newspapers. This was in the 1500s. And Martin Luther created the other mazhab, which is Protestantism. So when Protestantism held sway in Europe, books written by the Padre, the Papal, the Papacy in Oxford, Cambridge, were burned. Once I was in Bodleian Library, I asked the librarian, he was quite irritated at me. He challenged me, he asked me who I am, why I'm asking the questions. I said, I just want to know. And he cannot deny that he burned books. So we're talking about liberal democracy and we're talking about human rights. Burning books is part of culture. and with regard to the present genocide happening in Gaza, again, I suggested some weeks ago that we burn books from Europe. Because the Europeans have gone against themselves. Anyway, I also discussed this in class. So the Al-Manar newspaper survived until 1937. It ended with the death of Rashid Rida himself. So the significance of Al-Manar is that Al-Imam is based on Al-Manar. Al-Imam is to some a copycat of Al-Manar. It contains everything that Al-Manar has written and published. Now, what does Hamka say about Al-Imam? The first name mentioned by Hamka in relation to Al-Imam was the Singapore-based Arab philanthropist by the name of Sheikh Muhammad bin Salim Al-Khalili, or Al-Khalili. Also described as Said Muhammad Salim Al-Alali. Hamka mentioned Al-Khalili. And Hamka did not mention at all Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi. It's very interesting. In the cry of Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi, we find that it's a very Al-Hadi-centric view of Al-Imam. In the cry of Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi, published by the Malaysian Sociological Institute, there were views of Al-Hadi by his, I think his grandson, his son, and those have written about him. It's like the center of Al-Imam is Al-Hadi. I'm not contesting that, but I'm just giving you this view of Hamka. Syed Muhammad Salim was early influenced by the organization Jami al-Khair in Java, and this in turn was induced by the journalism of the reformist periodical Wutka, and Al-Manar. So Syed Muhammad Salim was also influenced by these two magazines. One published in Paris, the other published in Cairo. Al-Imam in 1906 and 1908 was conceived partly under those conditions. Conceived partly under those conditions. A close friend of Al-Khalili was the Minangkabau Cairo trained ulama Sheikh Muhammad Tahir bin Muhammad Jalaluddin Al-Azhari. Even though Sheikh Muhammad Tahir was a popular ulama in the Malay, he was an astronomer. He was trained in Al-Azhar. And because of his views in the 1920s, I think he was banished from Perak to Johor. I think he was a mufti. Together with Sheikh Muhammad Tahir, they produced the monthly magazine Al-Imam. So is these two, Sheikh Muhammad Salim Al-Khalili and Sheikh Tahir Jalaluddin. The maiden issue appeared in July 1906, led by Al-Khalili, who was said to be the publisher and financier. The monthly second issue, published in August, was edited by Sheikh Tahir Jalaluddin. But Al-Imam is interesting about Al-Imam. Al-Imam is, although based in Singapore, but it's a cosmopolitan newspaper. It was read all over the archipelago. At that time, you find this, we thought that only newspapers, they are read only where they're published. No, they're read in Penang, they're read in Delhi, they're read in Batavia, they're read in Singapore, as well as in Borneo. And they have correspondence or Pawarta in these places. So the Al-Imam, as a reform journal, is a reform journal of the Malay Archipelago, not a reform journal of Malaysia or Singapore or Sumatra, because it binds together, it carries the spirit of Al-Uratul Wusta, the strong ties. So it strengthened, it created a network of reform consciousness among the Malays in the Malay Archipelago. This is very important. So you can see this cosmopolitan nature of Al-Imam. Syed Khairuddin Al-Junaid wrote a book on the cosmopolitan Islam based on Hamka. But also Al-Imam is a manifestation of cosmopolitan Islam in terms of its engagement with modernity, in terms of its readership, in terms of its circulation, and in terms of the issues they cover. The second issue stated that they were led by Syed Muhammad bin Abrahman bin Shahab in Betawi, Jakarta, and Haji Abdul Karim bin Tuanku Kisai in Danau, Sumatra. These are the names which Hamka mentioned. I think you may be familiar with some of those names. Haji Abdul Karim bin Tuanku Kisai in Danau. I think Danau means Maninjau. I think it's near Maninjau where Hamka lived. In his biography, Ayahku, Hamka accounts on Al-Imam mainly highlighted on the questions and queries on religious practices and rituals by the Malays. One of those popular questions raised by Al-Imam is that of riba, interest, which was raised in its 11th issue. In Hamka's view, which would contradict the book, The Cry of Al-Hadi, the dominant figure in Al-Imam was Sheikh Tahir Jalaluddin. So Hamka gave a different view. The dominant view that we know is Sheikh Al-Hadi, but it was Sheikh Tahir, according to Hamka. And I've come across why Sheikh Tahir was subdued in the discourse. It could be that Sheikh Tahir was said to be a poor writer. I think this is from Roth. So Al-Hadi was a better writer. So Al-Hadi was seen to be the man dominant. But dominant figure according to Hamka is Sheikh Tahir Zaruddin. Sheikh Tahir was much a follower of Muhammad Abduh and had been subscribing to Al-Manar until the journal ceased publication. So Sheikh Tahir carried the worldview of Al-Manar and by extension the thinking of Muhammad Abduh in Paris. Sheikh Tahir was said to be traveling back and forth to Mecca and Egypt, and he was a close friend of Sayyid Muhammad Rashid Riza. In the book, The Cry of Al-Hadi, it was said that Al-Hadi may have met Rashid Riza. Al-Hadi went to Mecca, but they were not sure. But I think I would trust Hamka's rendition of because Sheikh Tahir was a student of in Al-Azhar, and Rashid Riza was there. So not only a probability, but it would be a factual incident that they were close friends between Sheikh Tahir and Muhammad Rashid Riza, the propagandist. Okay? So Riza was known as propagandist, and they were very fluent in European history. This is again another phenomenon. I've tested that in my writing. It's published in the Prof. Osman Bakar's Fashriff on civilization. I have a chapter on that, on the Al-Hadi writing for the West. In fact, Al-Hadi benefited from the literacy of European history through Muhammad Abduh. In Rashid Riza's absence, he would delegate his editorial to his student, Haji Abbas Taha. At certain times, Al-Imam's leader and commentary were penned, according to Hamka, at certain times. According to Roth and others, at most of the time, but according to Hamka, at certain times, Al-Imam's leader means leader pengarang, and commentaries were penned by Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi and assisted by Syed Muhammad bin Agil. This is another, I think, maybe his relative, Syed Muhammad Agil, I'm not sure. It will be instructive to recall that the discourse on Al-Imam encountered Al-Hadi was the dominant figure. Some have argued that the representation of Al-Hadi in driving Al-Imam was that he was more brilliant, a more brilliant writer than Sheikh Tahir. In its June 1908 issue, Al-Imam firmly expressed that Al-Imam is the fierce enemy of all innovation and superstition. Fierce enemy of all innovation and superstition. Hamka described this karut. He used the word karut. Karut means what? Something which is nonsense. Blind following, taklid, and custom introduced in religion. So this is the picture that one were to gather if one were to read Al-Imam. An enemy of taklid or taklid buta, blind following, critical of bid'ah. They would be they would frown upon bid'ah and whatever innovation. And in the words of Hamka, Al-Imam in Malay adalah musuh yang amat bengis bagi sekalian bid'ah dan khurafat. Okay? Dan ikutan dan adat yang dimasukkan orang pada agama. I was thinking that in these words may be reflecting Hamka's resonance over Minangkabau society, based on adat, based on the blind faith of religion. Hamka, in revealing Syed Muhammad Al-Kalali as Al-Imam's financier, also acknowledges Syed Muhammad bin Agil and Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi as responsible for facilitating a capital of 20,000 ringgit at that time, 1906. But Al-Imam suffered from competition. That's why it lasted only for 2 years. But the duration of 2 years is short, but it made Al-Imam one of the most popular periodicals in the Malay world. The expressive and radical nature of Al-Imam spurred a new excitement in journalism among the Malay Muslims. Al-Imam triggered this excitement. In fact, I would hesitate to think also that the popularity of newspapers in the Malay world, principally published in Singapore and Penang, was also triggered by developments in Turkey, because many of these newspapers, especially in the 1800s and early 1900s, cover the Balkan War, Turkish involvement in the Crimea and Russia. The fate of the Caliphate was highly discussed. If you look at the society in Penang and Singapore, they were discussing about, the Caliphate is falling, so what do we do now? Because again, interestingly, Penang do not have a sultanate. So the Malays in Penang were not bounded by loyalty to the Sultan. There was a survey done in, I think, in the 1915, of loyalties. Who would the Malays be loyal to? So the Malays in Pahang, although they say that the Caliphate is important, but they express loyalty to Sultan of Pahang. But the Malays in Tanjung, they express loyalty to the Caliphate, to the Sultan Abdul Hamid, and to those last few Ottoman rulers. So again, you see this consciousness and this direction of loyalty. So Al-Imam anyway had to contend with competition. According to Hamka, the magazine ceased publication in 1909. But most sources say it's 1908. Hamka said 1909. Hence, that ended the beginning of a series of periodicals on reform and Islam that were to triumph through the decades before World War II. Because from the death of Al-Imam, 1908, there were a number of significant newspapers continuing the legacy of Al-Imam until World War II, and Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi was instrumental. These were the role of Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi. 5 more minutes. Okay. Role of Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi in expressing and continuing the spirit when he moved after Al-Imam died. Al-Hadi moved to Terengganu, and then he formed a madrasah there, and he moved back to Malacca. He started a madrasah, but later he moved to Penang. And in Penang, for I think more than 20 years, he began his vision, where newspapers like Neraca and so on was published, and he established a printing press, Jelutung Press. The Jelutung Press is an important institution because he knows that without the printing press, one cannot advocate any form of perjuangan. So Al-Hadi, in this case, is a man who knows print culture as a tool and as a weapon. So the damage of Al-Imam saw the emergence of Al-Munir in Padang. Al-Munir was published between 1911 and 1915, was the outcome of initiatives by Sheikh Tahir and Sheikh Ahmad Khatib in Mecca. Sheikh Ahmad Khatib is a well-known ulama in Mecca. He was a mathematician. He was in mathematics, but also an ulama. Al-Munir was supported by some well-known Minangkabau ulamas, namely Sheikh Muhammad Jamal Jambek. Sheikh Muhammad Jamal Jambek is a famous ulama also. in Payakumbuh, I think. A number of known Minangkabau figures were his students. Sheikh Muhammad Taib bin Haji Umar Batu Sangkar in Batu Sangkar. Hamka's father, Haji Abdul Karim bin Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Danau, and Haji Abdullah bin Haji Ahmad at Padang Panjang. Padang Panjang is located between Padang and Bukit Tinggi, and Padang Panjang is a center for the copying of the Quran. Quran was much copied, and some of this Quran, based on the certain narratives, were circulated all over the archipelago to Sulawesi and so on. And these are Minangkabau Quran. There are certain characteristics of the Minangkabau Quran, one of which is the color, I think black and yellow and red. There's Minangkabau colors, the German color. Haji Abdullah was a skillful writer who conceived Al-Munir as a continuation of Al-Imam. From Padang Panjang on the Minangkabau Highlands, on the road to Bukit Tinggi, where he lived, he moved to the coastal town of Padang, now the capital of West Sumatra. There, Al-Munir was published, and he lists the staff of Al-Munir as comprising Haji Abdullah himself as director, Haji Marah Muhammad bin Abdul Hamid. The others are, these are names mentioned by Hamka. Some of you may know, perhaps. Haji Sultan Jamaluddin Abu Bakar, Haji Abdul Karim Abdullah, his father, Muhammad Dahlan, I think Muhammad Dahlan is the founder of Muhammadiyah. Yeah, Muhammadiyah, yeah. Sultan Lemak Tuah, Haji Muhammad Taib, Umar Batu Sangkar, and Sultan Muhammad Salim Jaksa. In the first issue of Al-Munir, it explained the name means torch, or that brings light of enlightenment. Al-Munir also brings the meaning of leading and advancing the children of Malays and Islam towards the religion. The name also means peace and prosperity among men towards life and loyalty toward the ruler. Al-Munir describes itself as the light leading to certainty of knowledge toward truth and reality. Interestingly, the maiden issue of Al-Munir carried the slogan, Usaha Orang Alam Minangkabau. It is centered, because it was published in Padang, it was centered among the Orang Kabau, the enterprise of the people of Minangkabau. Al-Munir was seen as a potent vehicle that has, to use Hamka's words, mengguncangkan fikiran yang selama ini tertidur. Mengguncangkan fikiran yang selama ini tertidur, jolt the thinking that has so far been in slumber. This is also similar to the first issue of Al-Imam in its editorial, saying or describing that the Muslims are sleeping, and therefore the Muslims must be jolted from their slumber. Hamka also used the term journalist Islam, Islamic journalist, in describing the role of Haji Abdul Ahmad in Al-Munir. Now, when Al-Munir ended, each organizers formed also percetakan press, also called Al-Munir. And the printing press was used to publish books and other popular literature, but not the newspaper. There was an attempt to revive Al-Munir under the same name of Al-Munir in Padang Panjang in 1918. That name, interestingly, was joined by the name Al-Manar to be Al-Munirul Manar, another newspaper that was inspired after the death of Al-Munir. So they wanted to continue this spirit of reform. Under the leadership of Zainuddin Labai Layunusi, you familiar with the name? Zainuddin Labai? With Tahrir and Abdul Hakim Tunku Mudo as editor, and H. Datuk Matwah and others. The magazine managed to survive only until 1922. Subsequently, Hamka in his chapter also mentioned the role of his father in Al-Munir. His father was playing two roles, one as a teacher, the other as a journalist. Now, finally, the idea of a reform newspaper and periodical in the Malay world centers on the conflict between kaum muda and kaum tua, the young faction and the old faction, the young Turks and the conservative ulama. But the term kaum muda and kaum tua did not originate from these people. It originated from the Minangkabau also, Ahmad Rifai. Ahmad Rifai, a Minangkabau journalist, coined the term usul fikir. Usul fikir, which later termed to be kaum tua, and usul bangsawan, which refers to the kaum tua. Usul fikir is kaum muda, usul fikir and usul bangsawan. And the sentiments opposing Al-Munir led to the publication of another periodical called Suluh Melayu, to defend the conventional thinking and to lay accusation against Islam and its rituals. Hamka did not describe further on Suluh Melayu in his Ayahku. But it must be remembered that Al-Munir was not localized in Padang or to Padang Panjang and Bukit Tinggi in Minangkabau heartland. It was circulated and read also throughout the archipelago, Al-Munir. The legacy of Al-Munir, and similarly, kaum tua periodicals published in Singapore and Pulau Pinang, is still felt to this day, especially in Sumatra. Perhaps not so much in Malaysia, but terms like kaum tua, kaum muda often was expressed in some circles, but it is much felt intimately and spiritually in the North Sumatra and in the Minangkabau areas. So essentially, that's what I want to share on the spirit of Hamka. It must be noted that Hamka was also a journalist. He has, I think he's written about more than 100, I think 116 books and numerous essays. So he was also a writer and a columnist in his life. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Merikan Hocam. So Hamka is a very interesting figure. I mean, recently there was a conference, international conference, and there are nearly 20 subtopics, Hamka and Quranic exegesis until Hamka and politics. Very prolific writer, intellectual, religious figure. In fact, as Prof. Merikan Hocam mentioned, that he followed the steps of his father. Let me add something. Al-Munir was published in April 1911, and one of the contributors to Al-Munir was his father, Sheikh Karim Amrullah, and they initiated the modern interpretation of Islam, or Islam in modern time. So, for instance, Karim Amrullah dan kawan-kawannya mengeluarkan masalah-masalah baru yang bertentangan dengan fatwa ulama-ulama terdahulu seperti berfoto boleh, tidak haram, etc., etc. So they interpreted new developments and adopted this one according to their understanding of Islam. This is very important. And another short information, pendeknya majalah Al-Munir adalah majalah Islam yang pertama membawa aliran baru Islam di Minangkabau khususnya dan di Indonesia umumnya. Means that Al-Munir published in 1911 as the first Islamic newspaper in Minangkabau and reached the other parts of Malay world. This is very important, very significant network. And another information pertaining to Hamka's father's contribution to this early developments of social changes and adaptation processes of modernization means that Madrasa Tawalib, Sumatra Tawalib, they had multiple branches in Sumatra, and one of them opened in Tapatuan in south of Aceh by himself, Karim Amrullah, the father of Hamka. So Hamka, throughout his father, he reached Aceh, and 1930s, 40s, he visited himself. He contributed to so-called the Pusat, the new modernist Islamic movement in Aceh context. He contributed to the development of the ideas in Aceh. So another interesting point is that 1948, there was a 20th anniversary of the Indonesian national anthem. It was accepted in 1928 by the youth movements, and there was an anniversary, and Hamka made a speech over there in Bukit Tinggi. So Supratman, he says that Supratman, the initiator of this national anthem of Indonesia, Supratman is a great man of the country who has given soul and enthusiasm to 70 million people from no less than 10,000 islands throughout Indonesia. Hamka said in a general meeting held this morning to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the song Indonesia Raya. It was a news published in Waspada, 29th October 1948. Later on, we have witnessed multiple writings in multiple newspapers. Hamka very prolific, including Fajar Islam, Waspada, even he put his steps on this newspaper. So this talk very interesting. I mean, not just only in Malay context, but it is very global, very universal context of Islamization and modernization process. So as we mentioned early talk, that journalists not just only merely disseminating news and reporting from one place to another place, but they contributed to the development of Islamic thought or modern thought. So this is very important that the network, another stage of importance of these talks, the network is not just among the archipelago, Malay world, but intra-islands network. And the second one is Middle East, Hijaz, Cairo, as Murat Merikan Hocam mentioned, throughout the studying like Muhammad al-Tahir himself in Cairo, or the Hijaz throughout the Umrah or particular Hajj visits, or studying in traditional schools in Hijaz, contributed much to development of this network, and it was continuous. And one of the reasons, I guess, because of the condition in the Ottoman state, as you mentioned, declining of the power, the multiple wars, not only just the Crimean War, 1852-4, later on continues the engagement with the Russians, and the beginning of 20th century, all Balkanian wars, and the North Africa in the Benghazi wars or Libya. So I guess the Malay intellectuals, scholarly circles, try to find out their own understanding of Islam. Not only challenging the colonial condition over here, but at the same time, they started to reinterpret what will happen the next step. So they decided for their own future, their own fate by their own attempts. This is very, very important. Merikan Hocam mentioned multiple names. Of course, it is quite difficult to follow all these names, but this is important to show us how the multiple names contributed to this network process. This is very important. At Hamka, one of the unique aspects of Hamka, he wasn't educated as some other leaders in the Malay context, but he was self-taught person and continuously developed himself. This is very important, and probably it is one of the interesting point of indigenous scholarly works over here in the last 100 years. I think these are very interesting points to rethink about the past relationships among the scholarly circles, intellectual circles, throughout journalism, throughout print media. So I would like to invite you to share your ideas or direct your questions to Prof. Merikan Hocam. Please welcome. Please welcome.
There's another part on the what Hamka said about his the role of his father in Al Munir. his father was tasked to organize a column, question and answer column in Al Munir. And interestingly, it'd be interesting about some of the issues raised then in Al Munir, and you can relate it to some of the issues raised now in our society, are on expressions of niyat in sembahyang or whatever, intention, before prayers, holding a kenduri feast at the house of the deceased. When people die and we have this kenduri, maratap, lamenting over a person who has died, and the practice of the counting the days, as in the words of Hamka, mentiga hari, mengempat hari, menuju hari, mengampat puluh hari, dan meneratus hari. I think this is the kita kata kenduri arwah. When a person died, then the family is expected to hold kenduri on the first day, or the 10th day, 40th day, and so on. So these were the issues raised in Al Munir. So we'll translate this as a 3rd day, 4th day, 7th day, 40th day, and 100 days. His father replied that the practice be abolished. All this practice of niyat before prayers, kenduri, and maratap be abolished. And then the issue is on talqin, literally to teach or explain a point to the deceased. We will see that this practice mainly after a burial at the site of a grave. And Haji Abdul Karim, through Al-Mulil Qaram, urged the practice to be stopped. So to this group, to Hamka's father, talqin is not, as they have rationalized, not practiced by the Prophet. If anything not practiced by the Prophet, they will say, don't do it. In lieu of talqin, he said it was better to whisper to the ears of the person about to leave this world the shahadah la ilaha illallah. That is to them better than saying the talqin. So these are also issues on attire. In West Sumatra, there was much concern about problems of dressing in attire at that time. I don't know whether in Malaysia it is the similar in the 1920s. In the 1920s in Padang, was stormed with debates on being similar in appearance to the non-Muslim. So there was this concern that of the Muslim being similar in appearance to the non-Muslim. And Hamka phrases it as apa yang menyerupai orang kafir. Apa yang menyerupai orang kafir. The educated younger generation advocated and defended the use of the samping, the samping that the Malay wear, the Malay men wear. Described by Hamka as kain sarung di luar seluar panjang dilipat sebagai tanda orang Islam. Piece of cloth folded around long pants, a sign of a Muslim. According to Hamka, even when traveling by train, not wearing a samping was deemed as a foreigner. This was in the West Sumatra in the 20s. If we don't wear, a man doesn't wear a samping, then he is deemed as a foreigner. He is deemed as a follower of the West. And be charged at the same price as the Chinese or the European. So again, there was this discrimination in terms of price. And then there's another one, the larger concern by Al-Munir readers on mimicking or resembling tashabuh. To this, Abdul Karim opined that tashabuh referred to using or putting religious signs such as the Christian cross. The issue of attire and fashion, such as the use of caps and other headgears, did not come under tashabuh. He also viewed that hisab, calculations, was preferred to ruqyah, observation of the moon for the Ramadan. And also, listen on, Al-Munir also raised issues on tombstones, blindfolding and celebrating the Maulud Nabi. So these were discussed at the time. Even in Malaysia, it was discussed on tombstones and taqlid. Um, also, things like karamat was also included in the Al-Imam and Al-Munir. So what is important here is to, a kind of renewed consciousness of religion that was brought in by these newspapers. But what's important here is also that one of the channels of the influence of modernity is not colonialism, it's not the West. It is through Cairo, the Cairene culture. You find that, and also, of course, the Ottomans were dominating the Arab world. So it was that channel of modernity that came to the Malay world, not through Europe as such.
Yes, any questions, please, or your contributions? Welcome.
Typhoon?
Welcome. Yes, please, your micro.
Yeah, about your reading of Al-Bunir.
Yeah, I collected Al-Munir, actually, all collection of Al-Munir from the National Library of Jakarta, but maybe after PhD I will focus on this Al-Munir. I don't have time for it. But when we talk about Al-Munir, I think we must talk about also Haji Abdullah Ahmad. I think the main figure of Al-Munir is Haji Abdullah Ahmad, and the Hamka describe him as a pen of Islamic modernism in Minangkabau. And also, I think there is a ideological discussion between the Haji Abdullah Ahmad and the Haji Rasul about the Dutch colonialism issue, because Haji Abdullah Ahmad get fund from the Dutch colonial rule, and then this Haji Rasul was against this issue, and then that's why he left Al-Munir, and then after that, I think he moved to, I don't know. Also, there is a communism in this discussion. Maybe we must focus on this issue, communism issue in the Islamic modernism in Minangkabau, because there was really strong ideological competition between these three figures of Islamic modernism in Minangkabau. Maybe just I can contribute to discussion just a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Typhoon Arjun is my PhD student. Who's submitting soon.
So it seems that during that time, not only Minangkabau intellectuals, learned people, but almost all centers, big cities, people were hungry to learn the Western ideologies. As we witnessed yesterday from North African example or figure, Malik bin Nabi. He was told, I guess, because of French modernization, not the British. Over here, as American Ojam rightly mentioned, that the people, number one, the Hadrami community contributed much to transferring all of these Western ideas. The second one is studying in Cairo, Hijaz, probably lesser number of people in Istanbul. But this process, I think there are two aspects of this reform movement. Number one, internal, as we mentioned, there's Khurafa, the folk Islam, the ulama or kaum muda rejecting significantly or renewing the idea of Islam among this community. The second one, against the colonialism. So they managed, it seems at the end of the day, they managed significantly to tackle these problems. They became the end of the independence. But the collaboration of all these ideologies, and my understanding, there is not just one ideology became dominating this process, but all collaborated to some larger extent. And Minangkabau, very important point in Indonesian archipelagic context, that it produced more leftist people study from Tan Malacca, but it does not mean that they separated each other significantly like happened in the Western Europe. So this is totally different matter. Yes, welcome. Any other contributions or questions? Please welcome, Prof.
Good question. I'm coming from technical background. Just to like to ask about the Kaum Tua in Kaum Muda. So I think probably it's clear that his father is also with him in terms of being muda. I mean, in terms of thoughts, right? I think. And being new mean, is it being new mean being modern? As agree as what the Kampung Tua said. When you're new, you say you're modern. I mean that's our other ideas, understanding or misunderstanding. The other thing, second one is about our own Peninsula Malaysia with respect to our papers, like Utusan Melayu is in Jawi form. Right? What's a kind of timeline between those in the Al-Munir and also Utusan Malaysia in Jawi? Is there any kind of relationship or independent? No, independent sort of growth.
Where the second part, Utusan Melayu began in 1939. Al-Munir stopped publication in 1936. In the historiography on the formation of Utusan Melayu, there was no mention of Al-Munir. But there was mention of other papers published in the Malaya that were not managed by the Malays. The idea of this was induced by Rahim Kajai. When he was in Lembaga Melayu, he was advocating for this categorization of Malay identity. Darah keturunan Melayu, darah keturunan Arab, darah keturunan Keling. So he created this idealized view of who a Malay is. So the Malay society thought that, yeah, I mean, there was no Malay newspaper. All these newspapers from 1876 until World War II have not advocated for Malay interest. So Utusan came into being, and Utusan came into being as a result of this realization. Grouping of several people, including A. Samad Ismail, Pak Sako, and a few others, Kesatuan Melayu Singapura. The first Malay political party in Malaysia was Kesatuan Melayu Singapura, I think 1917, if I'm not wrong. Singapore Malays Union, Yusuf Abdullah. So there was no continuity actually, and it was created as an independent autonomous institution, and at that time Utusan Melayu was a radical newspaper compared to the image. This is also another thing which I want to use this platform to tell that, for example, the newspaper Utusan Melayu, which has been chided, which has been condescended upon, which has been said to be the mouthpiece of the government, very conservative, very newspaper that based on entertainment, was actually a very independent, radical newspaper from 1939 until 1961. What happened in 61? UMNO took over. Okay? Before that, it was very critical of the Malays. It was also sympathetic to the Indonesian independence. It was seen to be a newspaper to mobilize change in Malay attitudes and political thinking. A sense of continuation of intellectually of Al-Imam. Okay? But there was no conscious link between Al-Imam, Al-Munir, and Utusan. After 61, Utusan was owned by UMNO. It was still independent in a way, but legally owned by a political party until its demise. Utusan Melayu, and now it's the new Utusan. So that's the thing. And where kaum tua, kaum muda is concerned, as I've said, it was Dr. Abdul Rifai who established this term that has been translated into kaum tua and kaum muda. Bangsawan Usul and Bangsawan Fikir. Yeah, I said Bangsawan Usul and Bangsawan Fikir. When he was in the Netherlands, looking into problems of again the stagnation of thought. So that created its own life as such. So kaum muda is again linked to modernity, and kaum tua is linked to conservativeness. But again, I should mention this, that in this idea of modernity coming through the reform newspapers, it was in a way a European idea. You know, Sheikh Muhammad Abdul, Jamal Al-Ghani, and Rashid Rida were modern men. They were modern men, and they were very well versed in European history. I've come across Muhammad Abdul giving his sermons in Paris, referring to Protestant history. Why important? Why is important? Because when the Catholic Church collapsed, those who advocate Protestantism use pamphlets and leaflets to propagate their cause, and they knew that pamphlets and leaflets are important in terms of advancing modernity. So they were using French history. Actually, this is the French phenomenon. Not only Malik Menabi, but the French have given a lot of problems in the world. But they use French history and they emulate what happened in France, what happened to in terms of the war again between the Catholics and the Protestants to apply to the Muslim world. So periodical pamphlets. You read European history, you read the history of journalism in Europe in the 1600s, 1700s. The use of pamphlets are important because they configured and restructured society. Political system, war, economic information are all based on the circulation of pamphlets, and also the circulation of Corantos. Well, you may have heard the word Corantos. No, many years back, the people of Malaysia, when they go to Indonesia, they say, the Indonesians have profanized newspapers by calling the newspaper Quran. They thought that Quran comes from the word Quran. Actually, no, it comes from a Dutch word. Quran means news sheets. Yeah, so it means news sheets. So the Indonesians have inherited the word Quran from the Dutch to refer to news sheets, which were popular in Amsterdam in the 1600s. So these news sheets, maybe one sheet or a few pages, were used as a form of journalism. Initially, it was commercial, but later it was political. It was a tool to carry contested ideologies, to promote criticism and subversion. So this was the method used by Muhammad Abdul and Rashid Rida, especially. Using European history, the methods of European history to modernize the Muslims and the Malays in the Malay Archipelago.
Yeah, please welcome.
Assalamualaikum. A very good afternoon, Prof. No doubt that some of the periodicals or the magazine or the journals that you mentioned just now have successfully manifested the cosmopolitan of Islam, okay, until today. However, I discovered that several enemies still has not been defeated, for which, for example, the enemy to blind following and the stagnation of thinking. Do you have any alternative, or do we have in journalism? Do you have any? Have you found any solution to address these two main issues among Muslim community?
Thank you, Hojang Buru.
Yeah,
Welcome.
as I've said, journalism is only one institution, but it is an important institution. You see, without why journalism? I mean, there are many other institutions, madrasah, education, the family. These are all institutions that create thinking, create ideology. But why journalism? Because journalism has the ability to circulate the ideas. Ideas circulate, and we live through the circulation of ideas. So these ideas have been circulating over the years, but they are contested. There are many contestations. If you use journalism to address the issue of taqlid, the issue of stagnation of thought, there are other institutions that do not go along with that. So again, you have contradictory roots and contradictory opinions, a complex set of society. For example, we can have newspapers, we can have journalism, advocating, but the political system may counter that. The education system may counter that. The mode and the ground thinking based on what local culture and adab may also counter that. So again, you have this countering of values and opinions, and this has mitigated such enlightenment. I would say, if I use the word enlightenment, because some people say that we cannot use enlightenment because it's Christian. Again, if we go back to the idea of enlightenment, it's achieving happiness, well, prosperity in a sense. But again, in society, there are many institutions, and these institutions may be at odds with one another. So that's why it's happening now, until now.
By the way, may I add a few things
Yeah,
to this
sure.
question? I mean, exactly the dynamism of journalism comes from this disputes. If everything's settled, then the dynamism already lost its aura. So journalism created a public space, a new modern public space. That's why novel things. So everybody could contribute. Everybody could evaluate, either in Minangkabau, either in Batavia, either in Singapore. So this is the important one, I think, in the dynamic process. Let's say if you look at this, Hojam mentioned referred to France and this Enlightenment in Europe. Even after reformism, 1529, counter-reformism initiated. After 1789, French Revolution, counter-revolutionary actions happened. What happened beginning of the 19th century, Romanticism in Europe? This is against the Enlightenment process, in fact. So these dynamism going around everywhere. So I think this is a good way. Thank you. Please welcome.
Question.
Yeah, please welcome.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. and Dr. Mehmet. I want to know at that time, through the newspaper as a medium, how the people at that time accept the modern thoughts of Hamka, like the prohibition to have feast on that after the death, the few days after the death, and also the prohibit to say the niyat before Salat. How the people at that time can accept that, because even now the mass people cannot accept that.
As very briefly, we mentioned that the schooling educational institutions initiated by this group of people, not only just classical traditional education centers, Pondok, Pesantren, Daya, operating in those geographies, but new modern new schools combining this modern sciences and classical Islamic sciences. So this newspaper, starting from the beginning of this British and the Dutch journalism, they utilize this journals as teaching materials. So their customers, mostly this newly educated group of people. So dissemination of this information throughout this schooling processes. Number two, the cafe houses in Turkish context, Ottoman context, Taiwan. So cafe houses played a significant role in dissemination of these ideas, not only ceramah in mosque, but people came together in cafe houses, warung copies. They got one piece of newspaper and they read. So these are the expansioning of public spaces again. I mean, we do not expect, or we do not expect that all the nations, all the communities were converted from their traditional way of life to modern way of life. There is no such sort of things. It's yes, please welcome. Sorry.
Assalamualaikum. Right. Just to reflect on what Prof. Murad mentioned just now, I believe that the policies adapted by the Dutch and the policy adapted by the British also contributed to the numbers of publication. Yeah, likewise in Indonesia, I mean the Dutch policy might not be that encouraging. Yeah, and then what happened during that time gave most of the authors, likewise Hamka and the others, to use the opportunity given by the British, especially in Singapore. Yeah, so that made Singapore as part of the area where all these publications emerge. And as to reflect to the statement made just now in terms of the communisms, yeah, the communisms also plays an important role because I believe that, as what Prof. Murad mentioned just now, why Utusan Melayu, of course, started in 1939 up to 1961 before UMNO took over, has something to do with the communism. Yeah, because the British did not give much attention to the Malay publication. Instead of, they focused more towards the Chinese publications. So all this, if we took into considerations, the emergence of the Malay publications has to be, influenced because of the policies and also because of the ideologies, and that give us, the Malay, in the room, for us to be more proactive in producing scholarly materials, for example, periodicals and etc. Thanks.
Yes. Welcome. Thank you very much, by the way, your contribution. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. Thank you, Prof. Murad and Dr. Mehmet. I just have one question, perhaps related to what our friend just asked just now. I was wondering whether there are other counter publication, counter periodicals to perhaps counter the thoughts that was propagated by all these periodicals, or if they are not, perhaps they were dominating the journalism scene at that moment. Were there any other counter publications or
Yeah.
periodicals?
Good question. Good
Excuse
question.
me, sir, because it's related to that.
Okay, great.
Okay. This particular Al-Munir is followed by the previous, as you told, that Jamaluddin Afghani and Muhammad Abdullah in the Paris in France. So it's followed by that theme also. So these Islamic reformers also putting the thoughts, as Prof. Dr. Mehmet says, that they, through the coffee houses, they having a copy. So I'm asking about particular policy that Al-Munir has adopted through the open letter. If that policy has the freedom of expression about anything of society, about the, as people told, political movement, Islamic movement, educational movement, Al-Hadi, and also the Hamka also working on these movements. So is that particular papers have that freedom of expression policies? Or they issued that letter, published that letters as it is, or they edited it?
Where the mood of expression in colonial Malaya, many of these newspapers, look at Malay newspapers from the beginning until World War II, they are not staunchly anti-colonial. They do not openly criticize and subjugate the colonial administration. And that's why the British government was quite kind to expression. They allow expressions as long as they do not touch certain points that threaten colonialism, that threaten the structures of colonialism, and they try to contain, of course, and not so much of newspapers, but certain figures. Later on in the 30s and 40s, you have the Kesatuan Melayu Muda, young Malay factions, and these were also people like Ibrahim Yaakob, Pak Sako. They were working in newspapers. This was in the 50s, after the war. But before the war, these were not seen to be a threat. So as long as the Malays are enamored with their own problems of religious differences and contestation, the British will allow it. And on the counter newspapers, we have Al Imam, and we have legacy of these newspapers until World War II. The Raja, Alif Wan, quite a number of other papers in Penang in Singapore. You have a few papers which I discovered to counter these arguments. These were professionally papers organized by the Kaum Tua. One paper is called Kisah Benar. Suara Benar, Suara Benar. That's the title of Suara Benar. I think Suara Benar is based in Melaka in the 1920s, 1930s. Suara Benar was formed to establish a counter argument to the Kaum Muda. And there are also a number of other newspapers in Johor and in Kelantan. Again, one finds the paper Pengasuh. Pengasuh is still around now. Pengasuh is one of the oldest magazines in Malaysia, published in Kota Baru. Very much, well, in a way, the Kaum Muda writers were writing for Pengasuh, like Zaba, for example, and a few others, Tok Kenali. But Pengasuh was quite an evergreen publication. If you go to Kelantan, you can find Pengasuh still, but it's not as vibrant as before, because it changed hands and it stopped publication many times, but it continued. So on the longer serving publications. So there were counter periodicals. Maybe we, and this is understudied. I think, thank you for the question. Maybe we can study that. Maybe there's a topic for thesis they can do.
Yeah. By the way, let's say if you look at this socio-political movements such as Sarekat Islam, right, 1912, Muhammadiyah 1911. Nahdlatul Ulama as a reactionary movement, Kaum Tua, 1926. All these socio-political institutions had their own branches of journalism. Means that, again, the public space was in expansioning for the benefit of gaining knowledge and the culture of discussion, new ideas, or old ideas renewing by new discourses. These are very important things. What happened or what we have observed in the last 300-400 years in Europe. So, I mean, of course, there are counters. Again, referring to this modern schools. Modern schools were blooming, but at the same time, traditional schools were also existed, right? Still very relevant. And one, yes, another question or contribution from left side. Please welcome from Indonesia. Contribute.
Thank you very much, Prof. But first question is to Prof. Murad. I heard a lot that Hamka at the end of his life saying that he was correcting his, his ideas about some khilafiyah issues like kenduri maut, or in Indonesia we call it tahlilan and also like kunut and niyah before salat. We heard a lot about that. He said after reading 1,000 books, I realized that this khilafiyah have roots in Islamic tradition. So this is the first question. What is your opinion? And the second is to Dr. Mehmet. I heard that you said that Hamka is not educated and he is self-taught. But my opinion, he is not educated in modern educational system, but he was educated in traditional system. He learned to many ulama. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Hamka, as you know, he's cosmopolitan in his outlook. He is not a strict not strict in the manner of being dogmatic with regard to religion and ideologies. In fact, he's very forgiving, also to himself, and to many things. Oh, one example is he was detained by Sukarno. He was jailed for 3-4 years, and when I think Sukarno passed away, he led the Sembahyang Janazah. So again, that magnanimity. So again, in terms of what you say, in terms of ideas, in terms of what we believe in, and later on we alter those things. I think he sees it with a rational sense of the need to adapt, as long as it doesn't breach hukum, as long as it doesn't breach the tenets of Islam. For example, the rukun Islam and rukun Iman. You contain that. The others would be, things that are adjustable, are seen to be conditional upon the context. I think this is what Hamka. Why I think his ideas at one time were not popular, but there's a resurgence of Hamka in Malaysia. I don't know about Indonesia. Over the last 15 years, Hamka's books were published. I think there are 2 publishers. They bought the rights to publish various Hamka's books. I bought some originally in your university book festival. One of which is this Malaya, berjalan di Malaya, I think. So again, and of course, Tasawuf Modern is ever popular. Well, that's why I think he's an extension of Hamzah Fansuri.
One contribution from North Sumatra, Prof. Budi Agustono, contributing just by sending us one sentence. Bangsawan Usul dan Bangsawan Pikir, the terms from Abdul Rubai. When he was in Leiden in the early 20th century, he used this vocabulary, these words, he says. Yes. In fact, we, as speaker and the moderator, enjoying much. I'm not sure how your feelings, but please keep on asking questions or contributions. Okay, one last question. Or before your question, I will add one minor thing. Prof. Merikan Hocam mentioned some very distinguished newspapers printed in Singapore, Al Imam, Al Munir, in Padang. Of course, the names of Afghani and Abdu and their disciple Rza. But before this generation, there was another newspaper published in Cairo and Istanbul in Arabic, Al Jawaib. So Al Jawaib published between 1864-1880s, almost 20 years, and distributed in this Malay geography because of subscriptions especially after the Suez Canal was opened. Al Jawaib, hopefully we will study in coming near future. We will see how engagements and networks developed through before Abdu, especially Rza, because we know that some Malay intellectuals contributed by sending letters, opinion letters to this Jawaib, and they exchanged the developments in the Middle East and the Ottomans at the time. Yes, any question or the last question? Please welcome. Yes, please.
Professor Murad and Professor Mehmet, thank you so much for this topic. It's really, really important, especially in this context, when we see that how, especially now because journalism has switched to social media, we can see how the main platforms are shadow banning the opinions of other journalists regarding the conflict in Gaza. So in your opinion, do you think we should use the same strategies of the West in order to counter the propaganda and all the we can say the like suppressing the opinions in order for us to voice our concerns and voices. Thank you.
Your question is on the suppressing opinions.
Yes.
Who suppress opinions?
The main platforms like Meta. If you see, there's a lot of like shadow banning, suspension of accounts regarding journalists who are exposing the war crimes of Israel. And this is just one issue. It could happen with other issues. So shall we use the same method to counterattack, or do you think we should use like a more like softer, or do you think it should be more a different way?
Well, in terms of a suppression of expression, you see what's happening is that the West is contradicting itself. It champions democracy and freedom of expression, but now it goes against that. It has become authoritarian globally, and it uses technology to suppress differing views. Of course, we need to counter it in various ways. And one way to counter it is not only through the media, but through education, through schooling, through various forms of manifestation. Need not necessarily be through the social media. It can be through economic means. Again, through divesting or boycotting. It can be through delinking. For example, I've advocated for academic boycott to delink collaboration between our country and our university and the West. It could also be expunging their views through not subscribing it in our academic curriculum. So these are things that we can do. Of course, we can use the media. We can definitely counter it through the social media. Of course, we don't control it, but we have to keep on countering and in a way deconstruct that narrative that they have made and to distort whatever is happening to the world. So there are ways in which we can do, and we have to use all means. In other words, use the media as a weapon. They know it very well, but we're quite slow in realizing it. I think we need to come to terms with that.
Thank you, sir. Very clear.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Professor Dr. Ahmed Murat Melkan Hocam. We have witnessed your talk about early ideas on journalism and reform in the Malay Archipelago. Notes from Hamka's Ayahku. Thank you very much. And you over here physically participated, and friends and the audience online. Thank you very much. We will continue this journalism and intellectualism series monthly in the coming January. Hopefully, someone among us will be over here.
Dr. Mehmet, January, we'll alternate.
We will talk about again another perspective, North Sumatran